You need to be conscious of the way that you look. Walking around here with that ash on your head.
Oh, it's funny.
No, it's not.
I told you.
You look good.
You guys remember how I painted my face green for the She-Hulk review? Obviously, I can't do that for this one, so I bought a hat. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever had been in the works for a pretty long time, as most things with the MCU. Although this movie had a couple unique challenges with its development, the two most worthy of note are the 2020 affecting production because Letitia Wright refused to get vaccinated, and the unfortunate and untimely passing of Chadwick Boseman after the film had finished its original writing phase. They refused to recast T'Challa out of respect, and although I've seen both sides argued, I'd have to say I agree that a recast probably would have been best for this film in the end, but I am understanding and accepting of the fact that they didn't, especially at the time where the wound was still so fresh. And we have to remember that Chadwick Boseman kind of became a social landmark after his performance of T'Challa. Hell, even Black Panther's appearances in Civil War were borderline revolutionary. But this all loops back into the point to say that this really messed up the production of the film. But did it make the film worse for it? Unfortunately, yeah, in some ways it did. But I still think they managed to make a pretty solid film, all things considered. Like any movie, this movie has its strengths and it has its weaknesses, but I think what's surprising is that some of Black Panther's strengths are this movie's weaknesses. I think a good example of this is the movie's characters. One of this movie's somewhat unique and almost surprising struggles is how it characterizes Shuri. Now, it makes 100% complete and total sense that she wouldn't be her same chipper self after her brother's passing, but this movie doesn't really seem to know how to make her fun to watch as a main character. I really like her arc in the third act of this film, but it's insanely reminiscent and almost derivative of T'Challa's arc in Civil War. I don't necessarily think this is a good thing because it makes her less fun to watch, and it's something we've already seen before in this universe/storyline. All of the other characters in this movie, however, are pretty great. I think Queen Ramonda gets the best and most character development in this film, and all the side characters are still really enjoyable. And this might sound weird, but Riri is arguably the least interesting side character. She's in so much of the promotional stuff you'd imagine she'd have a larger part or be a bigger deal, but she does a lot of sitting out for this film. I really wouldn't be surprised if we counted it and it turns out she totaled less than 20 minutes of screen time, which is disappointing because she's interesting. She's just never really given her own chance to shine, but she'll definitely be getting that in her Disney Plus show that's coming out, I believe, next year. But some of the side characters in this movie do feel underutilized. Not M'Baku though. They really took his character in the right direction. M'Baku Disney Plus show when? This movie does do a lot right though. Namor is a strong villain who's really fucking compelling. He is written astonishingly well. The MCU villain track record isn't so great, so it came to me as a shock how much I genuinely enjoyed him. I think his overall plan is a little thin, but his motivations are still strong and believable. The biggest problem this film has is its runtime. It clocks in at about 2 hours and 35 minutes without credits, but it doesn't really warrant that runtime, mostly because of the first act. The first act of this film is sort of a double-edged sword. It shows the fallout of T'Challa not being present, which I really like, but the dialogue that surrounds this isn't really entertaining or attention-grabbing. There's a lot of pauses and the camera work isn't really that interesting. At the point where we're still dealing with T'Challa, I just wanted to see more of Namor and the Atlanteans again. Although it makes sense for these characters to be grieving, the long period of time that it takes for them to move on really does drag this film down. I can't really imagine watching this film anytime soon again because I don't really want to sit through the first 50 or so minutes of it. Even though the second act of this film is an absolute blast, the first 50 minutes would just burn me up upon re-entry. Something that this film does really well at some points and really terribly at others is, unsurprisingly, the CGI. Sometimes it's a 10 out of 10, and then sometimes it's Black Panther 1 all over again. I'd say we could call this another MCU problem because we all know that all of their CG has been pretty shoddy. But this was a problem we had with Black Panther 1, and they weren't even on that much of a time crunch then. It probably is an MCU problem though. There's a joke in She-Hulk where they say that the VFX team couldn't even finish the VFX on She-Hulk because they had to go work on Black Panther, and it's pretty public that they treat their workers terribly at Marvel Studios. But there's one scene specifically, and I have no idea why they did this, but the entire time Namor is underwater, it's actually Namor's actor, like it's a physical person there, but for one scene and one scene only, he's entirely CGI, It looks like a PS4 cutscene. I don't know why they did it. I feel like I've been saying a lot of negative things about this movie, but possibly some of the greatest strengths from Black Panther 1 are still in this film. This movie still has much better camera work than every other MCU film, maybe besides Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, but they did have Sam Raimi directing that. However, the cinematography blows everything else out of the water. Even outside of Marvel projects, this film stands on its own 2 feet in that department very, very well. The set designs are still amazing. The location of Talakon was really well made. Personally, I wasn't actually the biggest fan of it, but I give it points for being pretty realistic as to what an underwater city would realistically look like. Costume designs are still killer. I mean, they literally won awards for it for Black Panther 1, so that's not a surprise. The music is all still really good too. The music was still really good, but I felt like there was less of it. And I remember in Black Panther 1, every song, both in the soundtrack and score for this film, felt like it added something to the scene, like it heightened the emotions of the scene. I didn't really get that from every time that music was used in this film. A lot of them did, like 70% or more, but it just wasn't up to the same standard as Black Panther was. The writing in this movie is really good. Outside of the aforementioned slow first act, it's pretty solid. Even in the first act, the writing's still good. It definitely just gets better as the film goes on. This movie also doesn't crack many jokes. Riri is actually the comic relief character of this film, but as I said, she's hardly on screen, so there's not really much of that. I think this movie was actually trying to be more of a drama, especially since we're dealing with that fallout from T'Challa. The comedy of this movie was really well done. The comedic timing is really good. None of that character walking in the room while there's a heart-to-heart moment going on and saying, well, this is awkward. None of that. One of the things I always loved about Black Panther 1 was how natural the characters are and how naturally they interact with each other, because all the characters, for the most part, are either friends or allies. They joke with each other like real people would joke with each other. They also don't do that, oh my god, your name is Spider-Man? There's a Spider-Man and an Ant-Man? I think the closest thing we get to like making fun of a character on their appearance or name is a joke M'Baku makes, but the way he makes it actually is pretty funny, because he's not even trying to be rude. I don't even know if he knows the character's name at the time he makes the joke. Alright, we're gonna do spoilers now. Please skip to this timestamp if you don't want to watch them. Red Panther is gonna count down from 3 now, so if you don't want to watch spoilers, make sure you're gone before he finishes. The biggest problem that I have with this film is how they really handled Shuri's character. She was designed to be a side character. They had to fundamentally change a lot about her to make her a protagonist. I don't really think she comes off as an angsty teen, but I do think that she's a lot less interesting than she was in Black Panther 1. That being combined with the fact that she's basically going through the exact same act as T'Challa did in Civil War isn't really that great. I've seen people argue on Twitter that this is an obvious callback and it's imagery and it's reflective or whatnot. Personally, I just find it repetitive and uninspired. Although I can understand how one might think, oh, it's nice that this sister is doing the same thing as her brother. We also have to remember, this is the student doing the same thing as the predecessor. We've seen this happen before, to the exact same character, to the exact same mantle. It's not really that interesting to watch a second time around. And I think the vengeance arc that she has kind of comes around pretty late. I will say, however, it was set up pretty early. They made it pretty obvious that Shuri was headed in this direction kind of early on, but the snap seems kind of sudden. The underwater scenes, although they were great and they were really realistic, which I give points for, I can't be the only one who kind of had a hard time figuring out exactly what I was looking at times. It was just really dark, which, I mean, they're under the ocean, but I'm still trying to watch a movie, you know what I mean? One thing that I found more funny than anything else is how Namor constantly implies that he has an army large enough to destroy the world. Where is it? Like, where do they fit all of these people? We saw Talocan. We saw the capital city. Assuming that's the biggest city in all of Atlantis, where is the military? I mean, I understand that they have super strength, but they still died of bullets. Like, the whole world, really? I refuse to believe there's more than 1 million of these people. And I may just be wrong. I could literally just be wrong. This isn't even something I'm gonna take off points for the film. I really just think it's like a silly thing, but I just have a hard time believing he has that many people. Shuri seeing N'Jadaka and the astral plane was perfect. It makes sense. It enhances the character. And seeing Killmonger again was not only perfect, but it's just fun. I also think it's funny that her arc boils down to like a science versus religion thing, but it's also just pretty well done. Like, it's really subtle. I mean, it's confirmed that she's atheist, and that's also pretty funny. Agent Ross's plotline did nothing. It didn't need to be in the film. Like I'm serious. It didn't need to be in the film. All he did was give Shuri and Okoye Riri. But are we really supposed to believe that Wakanda didn't have the technology to track her down? Like, genuinely, he didn't need to be in this film. Remove his plot from the film and genuinely nothing changes about it. He's presented as he's supposed to be staving off the external threat of America going to attack Wakanda, but America would never do that. No country's even dumb enough to try and attack Wakanda after the stunt that Queen Ramonda pulled at the UN at the very beginning of this film. I genuinely think it's stupid. And the fact that that white lady, I don't remember her name, supposedly tapped Komoyo beads. Yeah, off, nigga. The last thing for the spoilers, just because I feel like this videos might get a little long, is I'm not sure I'm a fan of T'Challa SE. I think he's gonna be important in like 6 years when the kid's like 13 or so, but now it's just like, why? I also think it's kind of funny, and this is pretty dark, but the kid's like 7, and this movie takes place in 2024. So if they had the kid in 2017, T'Challa gets dusted in 2018, gets blipped back in 2023, and then dies pretty much immediately after. T'Challa was basically an absentee father. I mean, obviously there's nothing they can do about it, but they present T'Challa as being like this amazing father that he spent lots of time with his child. I'm like, when did that happen? I guess they don't really say that specifically, but they say a line along the lines of, T'Challa prepared us for his death, but like when did he do that? But I think this kid's gonna be more valuable when they inevitably kill Shuri in Black Panther 7, Return of the King. Okay, so in conclusion, this movie has some pretty high highs and some lows that aren't really that low. Most of the things that made Black Panther 1 great are still here. I think the movie is very well written, I think the movie is very well directed, and I think the movie is very well acted. But it has some weak points with its characters and story arcs. I also didn't mention it before, but the acting in this film is really good. I don't really even know if I needed to mention it. Like, we know that Denai Guerrera can put up a great performance. We know that Letitia Wright is a great actor. Questionable person, but great actor. But overall, I'm gonna give Black Panther 2 a 7 out of 10. I think the film is still very enjoyable, but it had fundamental problems that clearly stemmed from rewrites, reshoots, and just a general time crunch. I also only mentioned this in the spoiler section because it's hard to get into it without spoilers, but there's a storyline that takes up a good amount of runtime in this film that just didn't really need to be there. You'll know it when you see it when you go watch the movie. But if you're just watching this film for a purely good time, this movie's gonna be a 9 out of 10. Outside of the first act, nothing is stopping this film from being a perfectly valid use of 2.5 hours whenever you have them free. I think it's important to give both a critical score and a fun score, because a movie can be not great, but a movie can be a lot of fun to watch. This movie was great and fun to watch, so that's why I still gave it relatively high on both scores. Overall, it was a great film. I think Coogler did the best job with the cards he was dealt. Namor was really, really well done. I love Namor. I know it's probably a pretty far way off, but I'm already excited for Black Panther 3. This movie shook up a lot about Wakanda, and I'm excited to see what this means for our characters. But until then, we can patiently look forward to Ant-Man Quantumania. Oh, that reminds me, this movie barely touches on the MCU as a whole. It's a very self-contained film, which is good. We really need more of these in the ever-growing MCU. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I say go see it. If you have seen the movie, leave me your thoughts down below. Just be careful not to spoil anything for the people who haven't. I'd really love to hear where you guys agreed and disagreed with me. When I told my group chat that I thought the movie was just okay, they beat my ass. They did not let me sleep. So I would genuinely love to hear what your thoughts are. Anyway, me and the Red Panther are gonna go synthesize our own heart-shaped herb. It sure is. You guys have a good one.